Hi everybody, it's Pete. Alright, this is the second video showing you how to adjust your front-facing camera settings so that you don't have any perspective issues. I'll be using my same little cheap stand and my dollar store mirror as I did in the early setup. I'm also going to show you how, by simply moving the camera further away from the drawing surface, you can create larger art. To do that, I'm going to place the iPad on this book. Now that I have my iPad up on a 2-inch thick book, it's going to allow me to create a drawing that's about 2 inches larger. But you'll notice that I have a pad here on my table. That's not a great idea because it's not going to be flat to the table and it's not going to be easy to tape down. So instead, I'll take this piece of paper that I've already ripped off and use that as an example. It's very important to make sure that your piece of paper is flat because any curling up at all of this while you're setting things up is going to give you a false impression that your camera isn't aligned correctly. So let me tape that down. Okay, now that we have the piece of paper taped down, we can select an image to draw. I'll go into the camera roll and let's go to all photos and I'll pick this picture right here. And we want to tell the application now to use the front camera because you'll notice if we adjust this, we're looking in front of me here. So we want to go to the camera control setting and hit the front button. The front button allows the application to not only use the front camera, but it also defaults to being set up for your typical Osmo setup. So I'm going to hit that front button. And you'll see it immediately switches to the front camera and looks down at your drawing surface. Now this looks pretty good, and the way that I know it is that the edges of my piece of paper are close to being parallel to the side of the screen, but it's not perfect. The other thing is that areas down here might be stretched out too much depending upon the height and the angle of the camera. So what I'm going to do to help myself here is I'm going to draw a couple of circles on the piece of paper that'll enable me to be able to see if the image has the correct perspective on it. If you don't want to do that yourself, you can go into the help menu here. That's the question mark. And then up here in the upper right hand corner, there's a button that'll allow you to print out this camera adjustment helper. And if you say print to my network printer, it'll bring up an interface and it will print this piece of paper. Print. And you have to wait, don't hit the cancel button, you have to wait until it's actually connected to your printer and starts printing. When it's done with that, it's going to print out this right here. Now having that down will save you the trouble of actually drawing circles yourself. But I'm going to draw some circles and show you the sort of manual way of doing this. So I'll get out of that and I'm going to draw using this glass and a pencil, a few circles on that. Be right back. Okay, I drew some reference circles on this piece of paper, and now I'm ready to adjust things. Because when you look at my screen, the edges are not parallel, and although the top circles are pretty round, the bottom one is just a little bit stretched out. That means that I need to adjust the perspective transformation for this so that things are lined up properly. To do that, you've got lots of controls, but your primary controls are these sliders down at the bottom of the screen. The top one adjusts for tilt, and the bottom one adjusts for perspective. Now, how do you know which one to use? Just slide them both and see what happens, and then you'll be able to correct. So I'm going to take the bottom one, and I'm going to slide it, and watch what happens to the screen. See how it goes back and forth? There we go. So that's adjusting for that perspective pretty good, and that's actually really close already. If I use the top one, I can adjust the tilt a little bit more and then the perspective one a little bit more. And remember, the idea is that you want the view to look like the camera was pointing straight down at your drawing surface. If you're using something like this, you can actually be very, very specific. And you can see it's easier using this than my circles because you can see immediately that the top circle is actually a little bit squished more than the bottom. So I have to do a little bit more tweaking. And that's why it's important to tape things down. You can see the bottom, when it lifts up because the paper's curled, can fool you into thinking it's worse than it is. So I'll put my elbow down on that piece of paper. and then I'll adjust this here. So let me come in, and I'm going to use my finger and just a little bit more. You just want to tweak things until they're just correct. There we go. It's harder to do this when you're... There we go. Okay, so when you're happy with it, you want to come up here and hit the save button, because all of that work, you don't want to lose it. And that setting will get saved so that if you leave the application and you want to start again using the same setup, you can. So it says you want to check. Okay, and now that you've done this, you can actually start drawing like you normally would. You just leave the camera control button, you leave the camera control setup hitting the button, and hit the draw button as you normally would. And now you've got a drawing surface that's very large. Notice this piece of paper is 11 by 14, I think. And you can see here that it easily fills up that entire piece of paper. So I'm able to make quite a bit larger drawings. And you can zoom in as you always would. Now, you'll notice immediately the resolution of my front camera is not nearly as good as if I was to use the rear camera, but it's still much more enjoyable to draw like this. So that's how I've been making all of my drawings. And I hope that helps you to understand setting up the various necessary changes you need to make to adjust for perspective. Okay, thanks everyone.